Thank you very much, Sanjiva, for agreeing to appear. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mahengee. Professor Sanjiva Wijesinha was born and educated in Ceylon, as it was called at the time. He graduated from the University of Ceylon as a medical doctor. And he then obtained a postgraduate degree, an MSc in immunology from the University of Oxford. And that's where I met Sanjiva many years ago. Because at the time, my husband Hemal was also a postgraduate at the University of Oxford. And today we are looking forward to hearing about his literary talents and from his Camino de Santiago. Over to you, Sanjiva.
Okay. Thank you, Shihan. Thank you for that nice introduction. And thank you also for introducing me to the society. To Ruan and Mahendra, thanks for having me. And to all of you, I think we got a total of 57 so far from various parts of the world. Olli Tovinen, thank you for joining from North America. Nick from London, Leonie from Brisbane, so many from various parts of the world. And my dear friend Edward Chung from Hong Kong. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. The title of my talk is A Journey Along the Camino de Santiago. And many years ago, when I was in school, one of my teachers said, if you're going to talk about a subject that is not familiar to your audience, just simply follow the formula: what, who, when, where, how, why, and leave a little room for questions. So as Ruan said, please mute your microphones. At the end of the talk, there'll be room for questions and time for questions. And then we can discuss things rather than interrupting while I'm going. So to start with, what exactly is the Camino of Santiago? It comes from the Spanish word caminar, which means to walk. And El Camino is the path or the trail or the way along which one walks. And the Camino of Santiago, because Santiago is the Spanish for Saint James. The Camino itself is a series of pilgrim trails that lead to the city of Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. And the pilgrim trails lead to the cathedral at Santiago because the relics of St. James, who's one of Jesus Christ's 12 apostles, are believed to be interred in the cathedral at Santiago. And because of that connection, Catholic pilgrims have been making this journey for over 1,000 years. El Camino de Santiago is translated into English as the way or the path or the trail of St. James. Just to give you some idea of the geography, that's France, that is Spain, that's Portugal, this is North Africa. And you can see how close Morocco is to Spain, which can explain how the North Africans, the Arabs or the Muslims, invaded Spain. 711, they conquered most of Spain. All this area up to Aquitaine here was under Islamic rule. Now this was the route we followed. This is the border between Spain and France. The Pyrenees mountains are here. And we started here in a little village called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And we walked all the way to Santiago de Compostela, which is almost on the Atlantic coast of Spain. From here to here is 800 kilometers. It took us 6 weeks to walk. And there are people who start from France. You can see this other map from Paris, from Le Puy. They start from Lisbon, from Seville, from various parts. Because in the old days, when you went on a pilgrimage, the pilgrimage started from when you closed your door and left home. And you walked to Santiago. This is one of the most popular routes because it starts from the French border. It's called the Via Francais or the French Way. And in 2019, over 200,000 pilgrims completed the journey. The number 200,000 comes from the number of people who reached Santiago, reached the cathedral office, and were awarded a certificate of completion. The criterion to get a certificate is that you have to have walked at least 100 miles. So there are people, 100 kilometers, I'm sorry. So there are people who start from somewhere here, a town called Saria, and walk 100 kilometers, and they qualify for a Compostela certificate. If you ride, whether it's a horse, a donkey, or a bicycle, you have to complete 200 kilometers, and you still get the certificate. And this 200,000 only includes those who get the certificate. But there are people, like my friend Greg, who I spoke to earlier, who started in, say, Saint Jean, walked for 2 weeks, and then went back home, and a year later came back and walked a little bit more. So you walk in stages. We met people walking during the long Easter weekend, and they kept doing this to complete the trail over a period of time. So this is an underestimation of the total number of people who actually walk part of all the Camino. And in 1993, the Camino was granted UNESCO World Heritage status, implying that it's part of the intangible heritage of mankind. Having dispensed with what, let's tell you who walked. That's me, the father, and Shihan told you I'm a doctor, a university teacher, till I retired last year, an officer in the Australian Army, and before that the Sri Lankan Army. That's my son Shivantha, a lawyer, a musician and an actor. And just to let you know about his acting, his latest movie is a movie called Funny Boy by the Canadian director Deepa Mehta, and it's due for premiering sometime when the coronavirus is over. So please watch out for it. That's what he looked like when he finished the Camino. You can see the Camino certainly changes you, and we look like scruffy vagabonds there with a growth of beard. 6 weeks, 800 kilometers does take a toll on your physical appearance. Now, I said the Camino is a Catholic pilgrim trail because for about 1,000 years or more, Catholic pilgrims have been walking. So when you first heard about the Camino and decided to walk, I was a bit apprehensive that we, neither my son nor I are Catholics, whether we'd actually be allowed to walk. But I needn't have worried because I found this saying in an old book about the Camino. The Camino is open to all, the sick and the well, not only Catholics, but also Jews, pagans, heretics, and vagabonds. I've had so many Shabbat meals in the homes of my Jewish friends that I could claim to be a Jew by adoption. I come from a traditional Buddhist family in the south of Sri Lanka on my father's side, so that would certainly qualify me as a heathen or a pagan. My mother's family are Anglican Christians, Protestants really, and as you know, Protestants are the people who were burned as heretics at the stake by people like Mary, the Catholic Queen of England. And I thought if all else failed, as you saw, we look like real vagabonds and ruffians at the end of the journey, we'd certainly be able to say we are vagabonds walking the trail. But I needn't have worried because, as I said, 200,000 people walk the Camino, and they come from various different faiths, backgrounds. To get the Compostela, you have to show that you walked, and you walked with a religious or spiritual intent. When is the time to walk? We walked in 2011, 6 weeks between April and May. Actually, we left on the 15th of April, which was the start of the Sinhala and Tamil New Year that year. I thought an auspicious beginning to our journey. It was a lovely time to walk. Spring was just settling in, and there was some beautiful scenery. There's some beautiful scenery. Spring and autumn are the best times to walk. The weather is good. It's not too cold. Although I now live in Melbourne, I grew up in Sri Lanka, and I'm a tropical animal, so I don't like the cold. So winter would certainly not have been good for me. And summer, that's when everybody and his dog wants to walk. It's a bit too hot and a bit too crowded. So if you plan to walk, the spring and the autumn are the best times. A bit of advice. if you want to walk the Camino, avoid the holy years. A holy year is when St. James's Day, his Saint's Day, falls on a Sunday, and this is going to happen next year. That's when a lot of people will want to walk, because one of the old popes decreed that if you made the journey to Santiago, you get an indulgence. That is 1/3 or half, I forget the exact fraction, of your sins up to that day would be forgiven. And if you walk during a holy year, you get a plenary indulgence. That means that all your sins up to that day in time will be forgiven. So there's a lot of incentive, if you believe in this plenary indulgence, to walk in the holy years. When you walk, where did we walk? Now, because pilgrims had been walking for the last about 1,000 years, there are places to stay along the Camino. What we would call in Sri Lanka, ambalamas, places of accommodation, and they vary. In the past, they were places where churches or towns or municipal councils or buildings that were run by what are called confraternities, that is brotherhoods of pilgrims or brotherhoods of people who supported pilgrims, who take a building and have it open for those coming along the trail to stop and stay the night. Some of them offer a meal. How do you get authorization to stay in these places? You, at the start of your journey, you have to get what's called a pilgrim passport. It's called a credential, and it is issued by the pilgrim office at the start of your journey or by various confraternities. There's one in England, there's one in Italy, there's one in Australia, and they give you a pilgrim passport that identifies you as a pilgrim. And when you stay in one of these places, you get it stamped. And in addition to identifying you as a pilgrim who's entitled to stay in these subsidized places of accommodation, that provides evidence that you actually traveled along the Camino when you get to the cathedral office and ask for your Compostela. These come in various forms. On the top right, that's over here, that's a house, a sort of Airbnb you might call it. It's a house where the owners have a couple of rooms which they rent out to pilgrims. It used to be 10 euros a night. You get a simple bed, often it was a bunk bed, and some of these places supply meals as well. That's called the Albergue Parochial. This is a bit more of a commercial establishment. This had a restaurant down here, place you could sit and have a drink outside. And oops. And upstairs there were several rooms. On the bottom left is an albergue, again a better quality one, which was run as a commercial establishment. And you can see that was named after the head of the Knights Templar. And the one at the top left, that's the one I like to spend a bit of time. That's an old 12th century church, the Albergue of San Nicholas. The church is no longer used as a church. You can see at the far end over there, that's the altar. That's a nave. And there's tables set for no more than 12 people can stay the night there. It's run by a confraternity, a society from Perugia in Italy, which runs the place. Every fortnight, they send a group of 3 to 4 hospitaleros. They're the people who look after the albergue. And first come, first serve. So once they've taken 12, no more can come in. This whole place is lit by candlelight. There are no electric lights inside. There's an outhouse which has showers and lights for you to bathe and wash yourselves, and toilets. But inside it's all lit by candlelight. And what really struck us about this place was the confraternity from Perugia. Before dinner, they have a ceremony where all of us who are pilgrims sit here at the nave, 12 of us, and the hospitaleros dressed in their very formal capes come and they wash the feet of each of us. With one carries a bowl, one carries a jug of water, and one a towel, and they wipe it. Reminiscent of that story in the Bible when Jesus Christ washed the feet of his disciples before the Last Supper. It's a very moving ceremony, and it's also a sign of humility, very humbling for us, and also a sign of humility on the part of the hospital-traders. So you see several different kinds of albergues where you can stay and where you experience different situations. How do you walk? Years ago, you left home, you put your belongings on top of your donkey, and you walk. That's a statue on top of one of the hills that we climbed. This is our friend Roland from Lyon in Paris. He was walking all the way from his farm in Paris, about 1,000 kilometers to Santiago, with his pet donkey Praline, who had, I better not mess about with the touchpad, who had Roland's tent and baggage on his back. Most people walk like the other two in the back of that picture with their backpacks on their back. This on the left is a statue in the midst of Galicia, and on the right, that man was going with his dog to Santiago, and the dog also had his little backpack. On the left, that's my son with his backpack, and on the right, that's my son with his backpack and my backpack. Story. We were going up a hill, and I was, being older than my son, walking slowly, and he was going ahead of me. He turned around and came down and said, "Tati, you're finding it a bit difficult. Can I carry your pack?" My male ego and my pride and my was pricked, and I said, "No, don't worry, man. I can manage." So he went on. About 10 minutes later, again he found me lagging behind and came down, and he said, "Tati, I can take your pack." By now my refusal was a little less strident. I said, "No, Shivantha, how can you carry my pack and yours? I can manage, don't worry." And he sort of reluctantly went on. 10 minutes later, when he found me still lagging behind and huffing and puffing, he came down, gave me one look and said, "Tati, give me your pack." And I gave him the pack, and I was very grateful to have this able-bodied young man carrying 2 packs for me. So again, it was humbling for me to acknowledge that I was not as fit as strong as Shivantha, and to say, "Thank you, I accept your help." Teaching ourselves to accept help from others. That's something we don't usually do in real life. We are too proud. Camino taught me that. How do you go? You can carry a guidebook with you. We had a small guidebook with us, but thanks to the people who make this pilgrim trail easy for others to walk, all along the way you get these yellow arrows. The yellow arrows that point you to Santiago. There are people who make it their job to come and paint the yellow arrows to mark the trail to Santiago. This was one of those ancient Roman ways called the Via Aquitana, and you can see the yellow arrows pointing you to on the road. And at the bottom is a scallop shell. You can see the scallop shell has got its rays all going to the node there. That's a symbol of St. James. One story is that when St. James's body was brought to Santiago, it was brought in a boat, and when the boat beached, there were scallop shells all on the boat. Another story, that scallop shell indicates the different routes that get you to Santiago. Whatever the meaning behind the scallop shell, it's a symbol, and sometimes you get yellow arrows, sometimes you get the scallop shells pointing the way. You might ask, why do people go on pilgrimage? There are various definitions of pilgrimage. One of the best definitions I've heard is it's a journey away from home in search of spiritual well-being. Another definition is a journey to a place in the belief that a wish will be granted or sins will be forgiven. These, like, people make pilgrimages to Katragama in Sri Lanka, or they'll go to Santiago, to Jerusalem. The nice definition I found it was on a BBC show with Simon Reeve. He said it's a secular journey to spiritual places. And finally, we must admit that there are some of us who will go on a pilgrimage because it's an excuse to get away from the routine of life at home. On the left, you can read that the road to Santiago de Compostela, for the pleasure of doing this, they travel far from their families and settlements and their wives and their homes and all their belongings, and they go to distant lands, suffering hardships and spending resources in search of holy places. That's from King Alfonso, Spanish king in the 13th century. But why do people walk this pilgrimage or this way, even if they're not interested in getting their sins forgiven or wanted to get a wish granted by worshipping at the relics of St. James in Santiago? When you go as a tourist to some place, you travel, you've got to like fit in 7 different things in one day, rushing from one place to the other. You don't really get a chance to appreciate them. But I just put a series of just 5 photographs of some lovely places that we saw. That is the church. It's a 12th century church, the Church of Santa Maria, in a place called Eunate. You have to walk a few kilometers away from the main road to see it. It's set out in the middle of nowhere. There's just the church, and on your right, there's a small building which belongs to the keepers of the church, a husband and wife, and they have a couple of rooms that they allow pilgrims to stay in. But this church, architecturally, it is beautiful, and inside you can see it has 8 ribs inside, just like the architecture of Islamic Spain in Cordoba, for example. You see churches like that. It's an octagonal church. It has connections to the Knights Templar. A lot of the Knight Templar churches are octagonal. It's a lovely sight that you walked to see. This is in another place, La Villa di Donas. These are frescoes, and you can see how beautiful these are 600 years after they were painted. Those eyes are so lifelike, and as you know, frescoes are paintings that are made on wet plaster, like the frescoes at Sigiriya or Ajanta. And this is about an hour away from the main pilgrim route, but we walked there purely to see this. This is the village square in a place called San Juan de Ortega. That's the church in front. And we walked here, we arrived at about 2 in the afternoon. And that village has a population of about 35 to 40 people. Every day during the Camino season, that's from about March till about November, the population triples with all the peregrinos or pilgrims who are staying there. And I took this photograph because we arrived there about 2, took our stuff to where we were staying, came out here, ordered a couple of glasses of wine, and just sat there in that village square, sitting and doing nothing and enjoying the pleasure of doing nothing. I mean, in a busy working life, when do you get a chance to sit up an afternoon in a plaza like this? That was one of the things we learned on the Camino. We learned the value of time, of relaxing, taking things easy instead of rushing like workaholics. And that is the cathedral at Santiago. And if you go through that entrance, you can see at the center, you enter the main church, and you can go down to the crypt where the casket containing the relics of St. James are interred. Again, I learned so much about the mythology and the traditions of the Catholic religion. I learned about Spain because, as you know, all of us have grown up in a kind of Anglo-centric post-colonial world, and we know all about England and English literature and English history, but you know precious little about France and Spain, unlike those people who were in Spanish Latin America, who were brought up on a diet of the Spanish world. So I learned so much about Spain just walking that Camino. On the top left, that's a painting we found in one monastery where we visited. And most of you will have seen pictures of cherubs and angels in Christian churches. To me, all the pictures of cherubs and angels I've seen were all white angels, white cherubs. You can see a blonde-haired little boy there, the brown-haired boy, but they're all white. I'd never seen a black angel before. This was the first time I saw what the Spanish would call Angelito Negrito, or Negro, a black angel. So when I saw this, I sort of dug Shivantha, hey, you saw that? There's a black angel. He said, yes. And then he looks at me and says, Tati, if you ever get to heaven, that means there'll be room for people like us also, no? And we both burst out laughing. This here, on the bottom left, that's the Bodega Sirachi. Bodegas means a winery. And you can see the entrance to the winery on our left. outside the winery, they have this fountain. The fountain has 2 taps, which is intended for the refreshment of pilgrims walking the trail. The pilgrim trail goes just past that bodyguards. One of those fountains dispenses water, and the other fountain dispenses wine. We were walking that way with Greg and Shivantha and I, and we stopped. And not only did we have water and fill a bottle with water, we even filled water bottles with wine. Great advertisement for the Sriracha winery. On the bottom right, that was in Galicia. Galicia is in the northwest part of Spain. I didn't know that Spain was a country made up of federated states. And the Spanish language that we know, Castilian Spanish, is the language of the majority. But there's Galicia in the northwest, where Santiago is. There's the Catalonia in the west, in the east. And there's the Basque region, which borders France. They speak different languages. And culturally, there are differences. In Galicia, what you can see that lady playing is a bagpipe. They have such a lot of commonality between Scotland and Ireland. Why? Because it's a common Celtic culture, and the distance between Ireland and the northern part of Spain or northwestern part of Spain is not that far when you take a boat. They were connected by sea, and that common Celtic culture pertains in both Scotland, Ireland, and Galicia. And the top right, that was the procession we saw in a town called Navarra, and that procession encapsulates really the history of Spain. You can see in front those 2 girls with scimitars, just like Arab dancers. That shows the Arab history of Spain, because for 700 years, from 711 till about 1492, the Arabs ruled Spain and Portugal. And even though the Spaniards don't talk about it so much, there's a lot of influence of the Arabs in the foods that the Spaniards eat, words in their language, even in their genetic makeup. Behind the girls with the dancers, you can see Galician musicians, and you can see that flows bagpipes. Here is the main procession. There's a priest with the cross. There's a bishop with his mitre. That's the king and the queen. And these are the people of the Spanish court. That's Catholic Spain, which developed after the reconquest of Spain from the Arabs. That's Arabic Spain, and that's Galician Spain. Why did we walk the Camino? Now, I said my son and I walked the Camino. He'd been in New York at acting school for the 4 years or so before we walked. And we really met to walk the Camino. Met in Paris, took the train to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and started walking from there. Outside the city of Burgos, we found this statue, father with a little son holding his hand, and that encapsulated the journey we made on the Camino, father and son. This was where we stayed in one of these albergues. It was in a little village called Maneru. There were about 8 of us there. And when we went in, the hospitalier there, he ran it as it was his house, where he had this big room with bunk beds downstairs for about 10 to 15 people. And he asked us if we wanted a meal. So we said yes. And he produced a meal. He had fried egg, fried chorizo, fried sausage. Every mouthful, I could feel the cholesterol congealing in my arteries. But then, as Shivantha pointed out, that if you walk 22 kilometers a day, the metabolism will burn up all the sugar and the fat you eat, no? So armed with that thought, and also the other belief that alcohol dissolves cholesterol, I enjoyed Nacho's meal. The lower one, we were seated by the side of a river. The river was in front of us, and we picked up some tinned sardines and olives and stuff, and just sat as dusk was falling and enjoyed a simple meal there. On the Camino, you can get what are called pilgrim meals. There are various places like the albergues and other little restaurants that supply for about 10 to 12 euros a meal consisting of a soup or a starter, a main meal and a dessert with water or wine, because they have such a lot of pilgrims passing through. So volume of sale helps them to provide simple meals for that low cost. And that's the two of us. You can see the beards gradually getting longer and longer as we walked in front of the Cathedral of Santiago on the day we finished. So if I can sum it up, the Camino is a path full of beauty and a path full of character. We pass through some lovely places, climbing the Pyrenees mountains between France and Spain. We start in France and then you go over the mountain and you end up obviously in Spain. And the border between France and Spain is just a simple marker, that's all. No guards, no nothing. And admiring the scenery there, the scenery in Galicia. It was beautiful. Plus the man-made beauty that we saw, like some of the churches. We stopped at a few museums. It's a path full of character. It's also a path full of characters, like our friend Roland with his donkey. We did a lot of the walking with Greg from Canada and Leonie, who I can see has joined us, who's in Brisbane now. And those friendships made on the Camino have lasted over the years, still keep in touch. It's probably not safe to walk yet because Spain, as you know, is undergoing a second wave of coronavirus infection. But let's face it, the Camino has been around for about 1,000 years and it should be around for another 1,000 years or more. It will be possible to walk the Camino, maybe not this year, maybe not even early next year, but in time it will be as it recovered from the plague, from the Spanish flu, from world wars, it will be around. So what are the benefits of walking the Camino? I will quote from a famous American philosopher whom you may have heard of, Mr. Walter Disney. That's from his movie Hercules. The physical and the mental benefits. Hercules says, I'm on my way. I can go the distance. I don't care how far. Somehow I'll be strong. I know every mile will be worth my while. Before I did the Camino, I trained. I walked so that I wouldn't sort of get off the train and start walking and get blisters. And I did some good walks here in Melbourne to prepare myself. But as we walked on, we could feel ourselves getting stronger. After a few weeks, a 22 to 25 kilometer walk of a day was something we took in our stride. Most of us live in our little comfort zones. We work, we go to work, we work 9 to 5, we do what we're used to do. Taking time off, 6 weeks off your work, you lose income. 6 weeks off your work, you're going to some unknown place. I knew just about a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to be fluent. I'd never been to Spain, well, I had been, but not this kind of long journey walking in rural areas. But you venture outside your comfort zone. The rewards are well worth it, as Rapunzel said. And also, as Pocahontas is quoted as saying, you think the only people who are the people who look and think like you. And a lot of us live in that little bubble. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, and in our case, you walk in the company of strangers. Those strangers are just friends you hadn't met. And after walking in their company over periods, they become friends. If you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you learn things that you never knew you never knew. So I'll end with the thoughts that life is just like the Camino. We'll all get to our destination in due course. Destination is death. So don't be in a hurry to get there. Obstacles and hardships are meant to be overcome. Undertaking at my age, a 6-week walk, carrying my pack on my back, or carrying my pack on my back most of the way except when Shivantha carried it for me, was a tough call. But they're meant to be overcome. At the end of it, you can look back and think, hey, we did it. So enjoy the journey, whether it's a Camino or your journey in life. Appreciate its beauty and savor the company of the folk you meet along the way. So that's the end of the story. That's the picture I took of Shivantha walking. You can see the way extending all over the hills. And that's the end of our journey. From Santiago, we walked another 3 days to a place called Finisterre. Finisterre is the end of the Finisterra, the end of the world. And there are theories that actually this was an ancient Celtic pilgrim trail, that the Celtic people walked on the pilgrim trail from wherever they were to get to the end of the world, Finisterre, to have their midsummer festival. And then after Christianity came to Spain, the church sort of took over that pilgrim trail and Catholicized it or Christianized it. So we did the extra journey to Finisterre, and that's the, you can see the scallop shell, and that is kilometer post number 0. Right, I shall end there. Sorry, you have to always have a plug from your sponsor. This is the book we wrote, Strangers on the Camino, because, sorry, as I said, we were strangers to Spain. We were strangers to the mythology and the traditions of the Catholic Church. And in a sense, father and son were strangers to each other because we'd been apart for about 3 or 4 years. And I was getting to walk and get to know my adult son, who was no longer the little fellow I carried on my shoulders when he was a small fellow. So that's why I call it Strangers on the Camino. And someone said we can call it Father, Son and Holy Trail with a bit of irreverence. If you want a print edition, it's available at Vijitayapa bookshops in Sri Lanka, Dimox bookshops in Melbourne, or directly from the author, which is cheaper than these places. Or there's an ebook available from Amazon. And I'm planning on getting an audiobook out by the end of this year. Okay, any questions?
Sanjiva, thank you very much. Right, let's get everybody on the screen. I was about to start my applause, but the whole point is if I unmute everybody, it would be a big disturbance. So we will leave the applause to the end. But I have a request actually for Shivantha. Can we have your views on this journey? 5 minutes, please, if you don't mind. Whatever you have to say about your experience.
Sure, certainly. This is impromptu, so I'll be saying whatever comes to mind. Look, the Camino de Santiago for me was quite a changing experience. I mean, I went there originally with the idea that I thought this was going to be some sort of spiritual connection. I've grown up, you know, from my mom's side as a Buddhist and my father's side with Christianity, and I've prayed in a mosque. I have spent time in a Hindu ashram. I have, you know, been to synagogues and put the keppa on my head. So I come from a universal world of spirituality where I think is quite all-encompassing. And I think the essence of that is what I was kind of searching for on the journey. And that's what I thought it was going to be for me. I thought, okay, I'm going to understand more about connection with nature, with God, with the earth, whatever term you want to use. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it was, I got something else out of it, which was I got to know my father. And you know, Sri Lankan families are very traditional, and my father's quite traditional. We've had that distinction and that hierarchy between father and son, and that has always been there, and that's part of our culture. But I got to, when you strip away everything, when you strip away your job, your workplace, your roles, your position in society, your education, you're left with just the essence of your humanity. And that's what you ultimately connect with. So with my father, that's what I found out. I found out, you know, you peel away. Since we're talking about Disney, there's a film called Shrek, and one of the lines is as the donkey goes to Shrek, and he says, Shrek goes to the donkey and says, ogres are like onions. And then the donkey goes, what, you smell? He says, no, we've got layers, man, we've got layers. So you got to peel away the layers to get to the essence of all of that, right? So that's basically what I found out who my father was. I got to know the man in a different way, and got to build that relationship. So that was the first thing that for me about the Camino. And the second thing was getting to know yourself and working through, you walk for 6 hours, 8 hours a day. And we didn't have mobile phones really that you could, you know, that you stopped every time and you looked and you took photographs. So you're with yourself and you are really in the moment, and you meet people and you have to, the best of people comes out on the Camino, and also sometimes the worst. But yeah, it was a changing experience, and I would recommend anybody to do it for whatever reason. You know, it's just like, it's like the Muslims go to Mecca. You don't have to be a Christian. You really don't. You know, you go for some form of whatever you're searching for. And I think we all search. If we take the time out to walk away from that, all the structure that we've created for ourselves as human beings, you'll discover something that you didn't know about yourself, and that's priceless. And you'll always keep that till the day you die. So, anything else? Anyone else?
Shihan, thank you for that. For my interruption, Shihan, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjiva, for sharing such an emotional journey with us. And of course, Spain was important for us Sri Lankans as well, because you know, our king, Philip I of Corte, was Philip II of Spain, because when Portugal lost its king in 1580, from 1580 to 1640, we were ruled by Philip of Spain. And so we know, as you said, we know so little about Spain. And it was nice to see something of a journey that I don't think I would be making, but I'll certainly go to Santiago del Compostela. So I just want to ask you, what made you decide to undertake this journey on the Camino? And you have written so many books, but what made you write this book in particular, and what set you off as a writer, first of all? Because that's quite a departure from your medicine and your surgery.
Okay, that's 3 questions. First question, what made me decide to walk the Camino? Actually, it started because Shivantha gave me a copy of Paulo Coelho's book, The Pilgrimage. And that's a kind of fictitious version of a pilgrimage. But he talks about this pilgrim fail. And I read it and I thought, okay, I read it and I thought, hey, this might be something. I told Shivantha, you know, this is something we could do. And then Shivantha said, Tati, it would be nice, no, if you and I can do it together. And I said, yeah. And it became one of those things that, you know, we must do it someday, and then you get around to it, and then a year went by and another year, and it was always to be done. And about a year before we actually walked, he visited us in Melbourne, and I said, you know, let's do it next year, because otherwise you'll finish acting school and you'll start working, you won't be able to get time off. I'll get older and older and too old to walk. Let's do it next year. And we decided to, as they say, seize the day. And that was really what made us do it. Maybe it was Paulo Coelho. And once you decide, then you continue to read. And every time you read something connected with the Camino, you start reading that. It becomes a kind of, not obsession, but something you read and learn more about. So that was the start of it. Why did I write a book about the Camino? I thought somebody might ask me that. I kept a few slides to show. Ruan and Mahendra, it's 9:45 now. How much time do I have? I got about 10 slides about my writing. So how much more time do we have?
Plenty of time. Go ahead, please, Sanjiva.
Plenty of time, plenty of time.
Okay, then let me share my screen. Okay, I thought someone might ask me because the title was supposed to be my book that I wrote. So I had 10 slides just to show you about the journey of a Sri Lankan writer, how I started writing. And as I said, when you're walking the Camino, you all need help, and you must be willing and able to accept help and seek help from the correct people. And in my journey as a writer, I had help from a lot of people. When I was in school, I always enjoyed writing, and there were teachers who encouraged me to write essays and short stories for the college magazine. And one of the greatest thrills is seeing your name in print. And then my father had a friend called W.J. Fernando. W.J. was the chairman of the editorial board of The Sun. And one day he'd come to visit my father. There was some short story I did, an essay I had written on the table, and he had read it unbeknown to me. And when I came, father and WJ were chatting. He said, I say, Sanjiva, you write well. So I said, thank you, Uncle WJ. He said, you like to write some articles for us? So I said, what sort of articles? He said, some health articles. Write it in English that people other than doctors can understand. And then he gave the most important incentive. He said, we'll pay you 50 rupees per article. Now, when you're a secondary school student in Sri Lanka, 50 rupees is a lot of money. So I started writing for WJ, and there were these health articles. And one thing I learned was, we doctors tend to speak in a lot of jargon, which normal intelligent people don't understand. So translate your message with non-technical terms. And that led to a column, Your Health, in the Sun. And when the Sun folded up, I had another friend, Singer Ratadumbe, editor of the Sunday Times. He said, can you write these for us? Singer used to work as a reporter and a sub-editor for the Sun. So I knew him through the Sun. And it became Health in these times for the Sunday Times. Gradually writing not only health articles, but articles about things other than health. And Manik De Silva of the Sunday Island, I approached him and he said, yes, you can write some vignettes, anecdotes, stories about life in Ceylon. So it became my island in the sun. So from writing freelance articles irregularly, it became regular freelance articles, and then it became a column once a week. And like Rome, books can be built from these columns. You have enough columns, you can get them together in a book. But like the building of Rome, you can't do it in one day. It takes a long time. So with growing confidence, I produced these books. The first book was the collection of the health columns, and the Rotary Club of Colombo West, to which I belong, decided to have a health education project. The objects were to raise money for the club by the sale of the books and undertake a service that could produce a book that provided health education for the community. So we got together with a group of members. One was Reggie Kandappa. Some of you may have remembered him. He ran one of the big advertising agencies in Colombo. So he was a good marketing person. A few others. And we had a committee, and I gave all the articles, and the book came out. That was the book, Health for Busy People. And as I said, you need a little help from friends. You need a little assistance from people who know about the subject than you do. So in my dedication, I dedicated to my wife, Dr. Chitra Wijesinha. I said, who's pretty to walk with, witty to talk with, and I have to admit, knows much more medicine than I do. So then after writing 500 columns for the island, once a week for about 10 years, you have a fair collection of columns from my island in the sun. So I made a book called Friends. I had a school friend whose nickname was Gulliver, and another school friend who became a university friend whose nickname was Butcher. As you can see, in Sri Lanka, we give each other some crazy nicknames. I had a pen pal whom I met later on in life, many years after we used to correspond and write exchange stamps as teenagers. And I wrote the story of how I met Kuan Sin. And these stories became what I collected together as Friends. And that photograph was my son and my daughter. And that the first edition sold out. And that's the second edition, which is now available as an ebook. Shian mentioned that I served in the army. I served in the Sri Lankan army, and then I served in the Australian army. And when you serve as a medical officer in the army, you see and hear things that normal people do not. You get to know soldiers and their families as human beings. And because of the experience and the knowledge you have, you are able to write with credibility about these situations. And I used to always enjoy writing short stories. I made up short stories. And over the years, I had a collection of these. And like I said, when you serve, especially as a medical officer, soldiers confide in you. You share their sadness when you see them with injuries. And these are, that's a Sri Lankan army soldier. That's an Australian army soldier. These are fellows you won't like to meet on a dark night on a lonely road. They're frightened, no? But then you see the other side of soldiers. These are young fellow like schoolboys. That's a corporal in the medical corps feeding this child. I know who the child is, I don't know who the parents are. But there is compassion that is brought into the life of a soldier, which a lot of people don't hear about. So having accumulated a number of such stories, I decided to collect them in a book. Not a War was a story my father told me about a friend of his who he went to school with, who went to serve in the Second World War. Old friends, that's arose because at Oxford, in Rhodes House, there is a monument dedicated to those who died in the First World War. And on one side, you get people with names like Brown and Smith and Jones, who served in the British Army and died. Young fellows who had been in Oxford and then volunteered to serve. And on the other panel, you get names like von Holzenbrick, Istenauer, Schneider, Germans who come to Oxford like Shivantha's husband and I did as postgraduate students. Studied and eaten and drunk and probably got drunk with the English fellows, and then they had to go back to their countries and shoot each other across the trenches. And very poignant. Sergeant Silva, he was my sergeant in the army, and his son died in the war, and that's the story of Sergeant Silva's son. I've changed the names, but the incidents are the same. And I wrote another article, Where Have All the Soldiers Gone? Because old men create wars, and young men go and fight and get killed, and then come back physically and mentally damaged. So the book Not a War, it's not totally fact, not fiction, but as Carl Muller said, it's faction, somewhere in between. And if there's a theme in these stories, as I said, it is young men and women who have to suffer and pay the price of war. And the characters are really soldiers and ex-soldiers, forced to deal with the loss of colleagues and family. And when the war is over, try as if nothing has happened to make the not so easy transition to civilian life after the conflict is over. So those are the books I'd written, and that's, again, you see that I don't pay models to grace the covers of my book. I just call on the members of my family. That's Shivantha and Strangers on the Camino. When I walked the Camino, I kept a journal. Since I was in school, I've been writing a diary. Every day I come home and like a discipline, I journal, write the events of the day. And I've got a whole collection of books, which are my journals or diaries for years. So when we went on the Camino, even though you're told don't carry more than 10% of your body weight in your backpack, I took along a small diary. Those days before we could carry an iPad. And I wrote every day after a walk about the journey, places we saw, things we did, people we met. And when I came back, I thought, okay, we were two of the probably very, very, very few Sri Lankans who actually walked the Camino. So many people, when we went, they asked, they don't dare us, where are you from? And they said, Sri Lanka. Oh, you are the first Sri Lankans we have seen. So he said, oh, thank you. And so I thought I'd be able to write a book. And I got it published by Vijay Thiapa because we were strangers to the history and geography of Spain, strangers to the legends and the culture of the Catholic faith, and strangers as father and son, and how I learned about Spain, about the Catholic faith, its legends and culture, and about my son. So that's really what prompted me to write, and the book has had a good reception. So some practical advice about writing a book. First, if you want to do it to earn an income, please don't quit your day job, because writing a book is not a, shall we say, career option until you've written a few books and the books are selling. To get your message out to the world, please write good English or Sinhalese or Tamil or whatever language you're writing in, because these days with self-publishing, there are so many people who just think they can write even if they can't string two sentences together, and they publish a lot of grammatically inaccurate and not very good books. It's worth getting your books professionally edited if you want to get a message out to the world. Some people write to provide children or family or the people of the community with an idea of their heritage. So be thorough with your research. And finally, some of us write books to escape from reality. but you must have a reality to return to. So that's really the quick slides I collected because I thought somebody would ask me about the writing. And those are the 3 books. So thank you for your interest. Are there any other questions that I can answer if I have time for them?
But I just wonder what your next long walk is going to be.
That's a good question. If coronavirus hadn't descended on us, my wife and I were thinking of walking. There's a pilgrim trail in Japan, the 88 temples of Shikoku. And it's something different because we've done a Catholic pilgrim trail. So I thought we keep Buddhist pilgrim trail and keep all the gods happy. And the Catholic trail goes from here to here, A to B. The Shikoku trail starts at Temple 1, goes round the island, visiting each of the temples in turn up to 88. And from 88, you go to 1. So that was next on our list. We've done segments of that trail. And this year we are planning to go to 43 and then go from 43 to maybe 58.
Hi, Sanjiva. Brilliant.
Andrew
Brilliant.
Nagam.
Yeah, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I have always been interested in doing a small section of Camino del Santiago, but I have always put it off from time to time, next year. So I want to do at least one section, the last section about 200 kilometers. How difficult is it? Are there sort of very steep inclines? Is it easy to do?
Okay. If you take the last 100 kilometers,
Yeah.
that is a town called Saria, and that is not that steep. The initial part, the Pyrenees Mountains are steep.
Yeah.
And as someone said, if you can climb the Pyrenees Mountains, you can climb anything. The latter part also, Cebrero. In Galicia, there are Galician mountains, but Saria to Santiago is not too difficult. The other thing is, you might know, some people just start in, say, Pamplona, which is after you climb the mountains, you come down to Pamplona, and you can walk a section from Pamplona to maybe a week. That's what a lot of people did. We met people who walked during the long Easter weekend, 5 days. And again, you can carry your backpack if you like. One thing with carrying your backpack is it teaches you to take the minimum. Both Shivantha and I, in the first part of our journey, went to post offices and posted back things that we realized we don't really need to carry. But nowadays, you can hire people to carry your backpack from A to B. It takes out a bit of the spontaneity of going and just finding a place to stay for the night rather than booking ahead. But again, there is no fixed way of doing the Camino. Everybody has their own Camino. Every way is correct. And if you decide you're going to do from Saria to Santiago, that's fine. You get your certificate. You can walk from Pamplona to the next place.
And these albergues, you have to book in advance?
No, albergues, some you book in advance. Some you just rock up there and stay, like that place called San Nicolas where we stayed. We just turned up and we were the first 12 people there. Edward has just said he has to go, so I'll say bye, Edward, and thank you for coming. So if you want to research it, there are 2 good books. One is by John Brearley, Birerley, and it's the guidebook to the Camino of Santiago. That's the only book we took, and that shows, it lists albergues you can stay in. It gives you the route, and it's worth reading before you go. And then you decide. But like what we did, you keep thinking we must do it, and then suddenly you say, right, we're going to do it next year.
Can I just make a quick shout out? Yeah, I was going to say, just to say hi to Leonie and to Greg, 2 people who we met on the Camino, and 2 beautiful human beings, and we're still in touch to this day. Greg, I just want to say quickly, Greg was he's younger than my father, but he's older than me, and he's got an individual relationship with both of us, and I'm very grateful to Greg. He's helped me out in so many ways over the years, and we're still good friends. So just want to say hi to Leonie and to Greg.
Okay, just thank you for inviting me. I have just really enjoyed tonight, taking me right back to the Camino. Such wonderful, wonderful memories. The best memories are the people I met on the Camino. We were wonderful, beautiful people. And yeah, I treasure you and thank you so much.
And if I just may on this part, everybody's Camino is different. Whether you're doing this type of pilgrimage in Spain or elsewhere. This was my first one and only one thus far. But I have to say that for me, really what made the 2 weeks really special was having this phenomenally privileged position of walking with Shivantha and Sanjiva, because I was at an age in between the two of them, as Shiv had suggested earlier. I was able to nurture a relationship with each one of them individually. And while there, not only did I meet these two wonderful people, but I saw this bond between this father and son, which was really touching to see. And I felt very privileged. And your presentation today brought some of that back. I would encourage people who are watching this to read his book, because not only is it a really good description of the trail and the day-to-day stuff, but it's also a really touching story about a father and son. And so yeah, thanks for having written it, and yeah, thanks for doing this.
Dr. Nandabalan? Oh, Nandan first, then Tamba. Nandan?
Well, about my grandparents, they were from Jaffna. Those days, they used to walk from Jaffna to Katragama. And with sometimes they have, what do you call this, bullock cart to take them part of the way. I think you should start a trail like that in Sri Lanka as well.
No, that is true. That is called the Pada Yatra.
Yes, Pada
and
Yatra.
People walk from wherever they are from, say,
one end to the other, yes.
That's right. And that's something that is happening again. But yeah, I probably be, if I go to Shikoku in the next few years, I'll probably be too old to do the Padayatra, but let us see. Amba, you're going to ask a question, Augustus?
Can you hear me? Yeah, well, we have had a couple of Zoom meetings before, but you were a real star today, right? And brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Sanjiva, the way the Sanjiva I have known always. Now, one question is your knees up to it for the next trip? Because after the rugby we played, is your cartilages all okay?
Tamba and I played in the same university rugby team many years ago. But yeah, the knees at the moment, so far, as they say, touch wood, they are holding on. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. How old was the oldest pilgrim that you met on the route?
Okay. Shivantha, there was someone in the 80s, no?
Yes, I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was not uncommon to meet people in the 70s.
Okay.
And no, absolutely. And as Tati said, I think someone was in his 80s. So really, age is not a factor, because it's a journey. You take your time with it, right? So there's no race. You can walk 5 kilometers per day if you want to. You don't have to walk 20. You just take your time with it. You stop when you need to stop, and that's the beauty of the Camino.
Shivantha, did the person in his 80s meet his ultimate destination?
Not well. Depends which destination you're talking about. No, he. I'm not sure actually. Taki, did he end up going to
we just
make it
that was it, but I'm not sure. We just met him on the way, and I remember he was in his 80s. But also, Sriani and Greg is the one who said this. We were walking, and he said, if you can just walk around the block, you can walk to Santiago because you take it at your own pace. And Shivantha and I were staying at one place, and there was this very tall, slim, good-looking German girl, and she was leaving at 6:30 in the morning, or even earlier. We were going down to have coffee, and Shivantha and I said, "What are you doing?" And Shivantha, you can put the accent and say what she said about getting to Santiago.
No, we just I was just curious. I was like, so, you know, where are you going? What are your plans? And she said, "Und I have to do 30 kilometers every day." And I said, okay, well, I guess I probably won't see you then for a while because we're just going to take our time. But she was on a mission. She was on a kind of fitness mission or a physical mission, and 30 kilometers every day was kind of her plan. So,
and as I said, that was her Camino, whereas we did, one day we did 28. Most days we did between 15 and 25, nearer the 15. I think one day we just walked 7 kilometers, found a nice place to stay and stayed. So your Camino, there's no set fixed path, there's no set fixed route. You take it the way you want to, you do as much as you want to, and you take your time of it. 6 weeks, I think, is a reasonable time, but you might take longer. And the beauty of the Pilgrim Trail is because it's been there for so long, every 10 kilometers or so, there is a place where you can get Nawatan or accommodation for the night.
That is very encouraging. Thank you.
Sanjiva,
Yeah.
the Ajanta Jayatunga speaking.
Yeah.
Can I ask both of you, you have described the human connections, the historical connections that you gained during the Camino. Did you actually get any spiritual upliftment as well? Do people feel closer to God, for instance, during the pilgrimage? And is that one of the objectives of the other walkers or the pilgrims?
Okay, Shivantha, you want to go first or shall I go first?
Sure. To answer your question, Uncle, there's a reason it was Catholicized and canonized. There's a deep, deep spiritual connection. There are certain places on the earth like Jerusalem. There's a reason Jerusalem is in the middle of these three monotheistic religions, right? There's a reason Bodh Gaya is such a powerful place. There's a reason Santiago is such a deep spiritual place. So the answer to your question is yes. Whatever your faith is, and it can remain undefined, really. Whatever word you choose to use, whether it's Gaia being the spiritual earth, whether it's God from a Christian perspective, whether it's the universe, whatever that word is, it's irrelevant. But you will feel something if you're open to it. And a lot of Catholics and Christians go there believing they're going to meet God and see God and speak to God. I mean, there are so many churches. You can just stop. We used to stop and you just go into a church and you just sit in a church for a bit and hang out. You just hang out and you're meeting God, you're talking to God. But also, while you're walking, you have such a strong connection with the earth. You're constantly putting foot after foot after foot. And you're forced to examine the trees, you're forced to examine the wind, you're forced to have conversations with the grass. I mean, as absurd as all of those things sound, it's true. So you do meet something, whatever you want to call it. So yes, you do meet. There is a huge spiritual thing that affects you, and it's to each of his own, you know, each or her own. Tati?
Yeah, it said that, I said it was an original pilgrim trail for the Celtic people. And it has been theorized that there are certain meridians that go underneath the earth. I think, Sam, you mentioned this, you sent a message in the chat. And those meridians, magnetic fields, have some kind of spiritual connection. And as Shivantha said, you go to Bodh Gaya, you go to Santiago, you can feel something. But also, Catholics, as he said, will go there and they'll feel a connection to God or something uplifting because they've done the Christian pilgrimage. But I was walking with a another pilgrim, and we got chatting, and then he said, you know, I'm not a Christian. So he said, I'm not a Catholic. I'm not even a Christian. I'm a devout atheist. So I said, oh. He said, yes, but even if you're not a Christian, even if you don't believe in a creator, even if you don't have a personal relationship with the creator God, you can still admire and appreciate the works of creation. And I thought that was very profound, because it showed that you don't have to belong to a particular religious faith. Krishni Veeramantri wrote the foreword for my book, and he said, cabined, cribbed, and confined within the faith to which they were born, the majority of the people in the world remain in total unawareness of the richness of other faiths. And that's something you can gain. If you're not a Catholic, you can appreciate the Catholic churches, the Catholic religion, the services. We met a group of people from France who were going in every church they stopped in, and they sang there. That was part of their worship. So, with the two of us, I hope we've answered your question, Ajanta.
Yeah, thank you very much. We had a group that went to the Holy Land, and almost the same group went to Buddha Gaya, and then we went to Machu Picchu. And as you know, in the Bible, we are told that we should not worship other gods. And that sort of scriptural notion was in my head when I visited these places. And whichever religious house that we entered, I felt that closeness to my God, whether it was a Muslim church, a Hindu temple, or even Machu Picchu. I just felt that closeness. And I don't know whether you experience the same thing.
Yeah, right. As I said, Machu Picchu is a place which was again of religious significance. No, the people there worship the mountains, and that was their temple. So yeah, I can totally empathize with you. If we confine ourselves to one way of worshipping the God or the universe, you deprive yourself of so much of appreciating the other people's way of doing things. And as you said, you can go to Bodh Gaya, you can go to Tirupati temple, you can go to Santiago, Machu Picchu. You can feel a kind of connection. You can say you're standing on holy ground, no?
Yeah.
One of the things, and I'll keep this brief because I know we're going in time. I was walking in Chicago, and I met this man, and he gave me a card, and the card, I just looked at it, and he had words like hell, damnation, repent. And I just looked at it, and I was like, thank you. And he said, did you read it? And I was like, yeah, enough. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, look, I grew up in a culture in Sri Lanka where I was privy to Sri Lanka culture is religiously so rich. We at a get together, you'd have Hindus, you'd have Muslims, and within the Muslims, you'd have the Sunnis, you'd have the Bohras or the Shiites. You'd have a couple of Sufis. Within the Christian faith, you have the Catholics, the Protestants, the Baptists, the Presbyterians. It goes on, right? So I said, look, imagine that there's a playing dice. You know, when you're kids, you play with dice. And there's a big die suspended right in front of you. And I look at it and I said, what do you see? And he says, it's a number 3. And I said, oh, really? Well, I think you're blind because I see a number 1. And he says, no, it's a number 3. And I say, it's a number 1. Do you want to fight about it? But instead of doing that, all I have to do is just say, hold on a second. Let me just go and look from your side. And, oh, you know what? I kind of see something. It's definitely not a 3. If I look long enough, maybe I'll see the 1, but why don't you come over here and just hang out with me and let me show you what I see about the 3. And then when you realize that somebody else on that side is seeing a 6 and somebody on this side is seeing a 4, and then somebody else is seeing a 2 and somebody else is seeing, the point is you have multiple avenues to the source, whatever the source is. So I believe personally that you enrich yourself by getting the opportunity and taking the opportunity to traverse those paths and to dip your toe in as much as you can, because the more educated you are, not only intellectually but spiritually, the more rich you are, and ultimately the more you take out of it. So I think I agree with you, going to Bodhi Gaya, and there is a sense of spirituality. And even though certain, the Bible may say, hey, you don't believe in false gods. Look, each to his own, right? If it makes you a better person. But I'm a big proponent of understanding or trying to see what the other person's point of view is, and to educate myself. I may not agree with it, but I don't want to be tied down by the shackles of one particular belief. And that's my journey, right? And everybody else's journey is different. So, yeah.
Well said.
Next time you should try Adams Peak. It is one of the best places I have visited, because when we were at the university, we used to travel everywhere. Like we had the Explorers Club. So going from the University Peradeniya to Galaha, and from there to walk up to Nuwara. And so we have done Adams Peak several times. And the best time is to go when there's no pilgrimage there. So you could see the whole beauty of that place. And it's, as you said, I think it's very, very spiritual. I don't know where you go, you find so much of energy in those places. I think that was one of the best things, that to go visit Adams Peak when there's no one around. So we stayed one night, and it's quite wonderful feeling that you get it. You can see the whole of Sri Lanka from there.
Shivantha and Sanjiva, I quite agree with the sentiments you expressed about how people see things and how you must appreciate other points of view and how you can benefit from other points of view and so on. My only right to that is whatever you believe must be compatible with the laws of society and rights of human beings and respect for human beings. If you have a very strong urge driven by something which goes against those, I don't think that can be tolerated in a modern society. So that's the only caveat I would add to that.
Hi, Sanjiva. We just wanted to say thank you so much. It's Shaista here, and this is my mum, Parveen.
Feel uplifted. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I was actually going to ask Shivantha what, if he was inspired creatively in any way. You were to write the book, and I just wondered if he was, but I think that all the things that he just said about spirituality may have answered my question. But if there was anything that you were inspired particularly in a creative way, that'd be interesting to listen to.
Hello, Sweetheart. Nice to see you.
Hello. Sorry, I missed the best part of the.
Don't worry, it's good. It's recorded.
I'm terribly sorry, but I'm glad I joined you even at this last moment. And
have you done the trail, Sita, long ago?
I haven't. Nisha has. My daughter has, and I have been in contact with people whose lives were completely changed by going on that Camino trip. And some of them was really at a position where they were going to completely lose themselves. Some were suicidal. They were all at some kind of crisis point in their lives. And then somebody gave them this idea, and they did it exactly to the letter, following every step as they should. And the stories they come out with are amazing. And it really touched me. And, it has made such a difference to them.
Yeah,
he should.
Shivantha is here.
Yes, I think we had a problem with the internet. Everything just cut out. All of us vanished. So I thought he should be getting on any second.
Oh, good. I thought he has assumed horizontal versus in bed.
He is there.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fine.
Shaista, you have the stage once again to put your very offensive questions to gods or something, so that make sure that they won't go away again.
Oh no, the guilt. I'm glad to see you both alive and back. We just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Such a wonderful presentation.
Yes, really enjoyed it.
And my parents are here, so it's very father, mother, daughter situation here.
Real education.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Really moved.
Everything that you said.
Yeah, privileged to hear that talk. Quite inspired.
Yes,
Ask your question.
Yeah, no, my question was actually for Shivantha. It was whether, like you, whether he'd been creatively inspired in any way.
You're asking, was I creatively inspired by the Camino?
Yes, yes. Since your father was with the book, I just wondered, I mean, I think that everything you shared about spirituality sort of answered the question. So it seemed like the creativity was perhaps internal, but was there any other way in which you were inspired to make something?
That's a really cool question. On the face of it, no. The answer is no. And I don't think anything directly. I walked away from it going, right, I'm either going to create an album or write a piece of work, music, or write anything creative based from the Camino. But I mean, I distilled so much and learned so much about myself. And as a musician, you're always creating, you're always writing, you're always putting ideas down. And I know for a fact that in order to create, sometimes you have to expel, right? You have to empty your cup, as Bruce Lee used to say. You empty it before you can refill it. So in that sense, I think it gave me a lot to work with. But I can't walk away like Tati and say, well, yeah, I wrote a book based on the Camino. But that's a really cool question. No, so yes and no is the answer. Bottom line, I mean, I'm still writing, I'm still creating, so I'm sure it did something.
It may feed into something later, which is sometimes what happens creatively.
Right. Yeah.
I just like to say something briefly, if you can hear me. This is Chitra.
Oh, hi.
This is Chitra.
That's the one I dedicated the book to.
That's my mom.
I just want to say that people who feel they can't do this long walk, when we were walking along the Shikoku in Japan, lots of people took buses and cars and went some other way, and they walked some of the easier ways. So you can do it in your own way, and you don't have to do the whole walk. You can take trains, you can take the bus, you can take cars, but do some of it, and you're never too old, and your knees are not too weak to do some of the walk if you really want to do it. That's all I have to say. So do it if you really want to. Don't say that you can't do it because you have weak joints or you're too old. I don't think that should come into play. Everybody can do it in their own way. Thank you.
Chitra, we are missing your lovely visage here. Will we be privileged to see you?
It's a beautiful sea, I must say.
Yeah. There she is.
You're muted, Ami. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself. Bottom left-hand corner.
It's bedtime, so we are a bit bedraggled. So that's why you didn't see the video.
The thing about the toilet questions is, in Japan, you wouldn't really use the nature's toilet. Japan is a different society. So you try to find a place, and in Japan, fortunately, there are toilets along the way. But in Spain, there are places where you just don't have toilets. And what you do is you do what, as young fellows you probably did in Sri Lanka, you find a secluded spot and you provide fertilizer for the earth. That's the simple answer to your question.
Would Rasika like to share her experience in the Indian pilgrimage about toilets?
Ron, you really put me on the spot there. You can share my experience if you. But I think China takes even. China is even worse because in the Chinese railway stations, the women's toilet is a free-for-all, which is just flowing water, and several women go and squat alongside others. So I think that was the worst experience. Thank you.
Sanjiva, I have a question for you. how many vino tintos did you consume during your 6 semanas? Because every picture, or lots of those pictures, you had either wine or beer or something.
Andrew Nagam, that's a very good question. If you read the book, one of my friends, or actually one of my patients, he said, Doctor, I really enjoyed your book, but I didn't realize that you're such a, he used it very politely, such a connoisseur of wine. Every day you're having wine. No, one of the beauties of the Camino is this, that in Spain, you can, for just a few euros, buy some very acceptable wine, like between 6 and 10 euro per bottle, and you got some very nice wine. And I always justified it, Andrew, because once you walked 20 kilometers for a day, I thought you would metabolize alcohol, like nachos, fried chorizo, fried bacon, fried eggs, and that, yeah. But hey, Andrew, you speak Spanish.
Yeah, we have been conversing in Spanish on the internet.
That's right. I got the message or email and I thought, wait a minute. So I sent you a reply in Spanish, and both of us can improve our Spanish by communicating.
Yeah. Because that's one of the reasons why I like to do the Camino, because it can improve my Spanish.
Certainly, Andrew, because I realized that over the course of the 6 weeks, my Spanish improved. When you're thrown at the deep end and you have to communicate, even to order something, to book a room, and you'll have to improve it. So I strongly urge you, plan now for 2022, and spring of 2022, I think coronavirus will be under control and it's good for you to go. Hemal, you were asking me a question, Hemal, when the internet crashed.
Sanjiv, what I was saying was, we were in Kyoto about 2 years ago, and also we visited Kyoto and Nara, and you get some beautiful temples, and when we go there, you feel that spiritual uplift. So I think I was suggesting that you should definitely do the Shikoku temple run, because I'm sure you're going to get that same kind of uplift and buzz, because there are such beautiful structures and architecture, and the surrounding gardens are so nice that you definitely get something very sort of uplifting. I think this may be connected to what you said about this meeting of ley lines and magnetic forces. I think there may be points on the earth where you get this kind of conglomeration of energy. So you could be very right.
No, what you said, Hemal, is true. In fact, for the Shikoku Pilgrim Trail, Chitra and I have walked about halfway on that. And like you said, Japan, beautiful temples. In Nara, did you go to that, the UNESCO World Heritage Temple?
Oh, yes, that's the one. That's the one we went to. Yes.
Right, that was amazing.
Beautiful, yes.
And Shikoku was good because you walk to the temples, and we did most of it walking, but a couple of places we just took a taxi and went from A to B.
Yeah.
And seeing all the temples are different. There's, like you said, there's a spiritual connection there. And we are hoping to complete the 88 temples in the next few years.
That will be very nice. Yeah, it's that we should do. Definitely.
Correct. Any other questions?
Well, I'm, forgive me, but I can't help being philosophical again in view of what Shivantha said about seeing the dice as 1 and 3 and 6. But maybe it's even more profound. One could say that if you think that reality is within an octagonal prison, and we all view the same reality from a different facet of the octagon,
yes,
we all see differently. This is assuming there's a reality. There may not be a reality, but we don't always realize that every time we see something, what we see is unique to us. It's conditioned by our memories, our emotions, and so many things that is completely unique to you. You don't have to move to a side. Even if the person comes to your side, he still won't see it because your reality is what you see from your perception. So it's a bit like Plato's caves and shadows. So just thought I'll just throw that in.
True. Very true.
Sanjiva, it's now, what time is it your time?
10:48, but I'm enjoying this and
good.
Seeing people I haven't seen for a long time. It's amazing. Thank you very much, Mahendra and Ruang, for organizing this.
Well, if you are willing to go, we don't mind going on if people have questions. So, okay, Ruang, take over again.
I'm just waiting for everybody else to ask questions, but I have not a question, a comment maybe. Sanjiva, have you read John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress?
A long time ago, yes.
Right.
That was, yeah.
It's much more of a sort of a Christian sort of, I wouldn't say even a novel, but it's a story. But then I'm just thinking every single religion has this kind of pilgrimages. As you said, Mecca is one, and this one, and in Sri Lanka, the Kataragama or Sri Pada. It looks like, I think I made a note in the chat as well. There are several different paths which all ends up in the same destination, and different people tread on this path with different ideas. Like a German lady, she wanted to walk 30 kilometers a day. That was her main aim. And then, two of you want to have a deep relationship, father and son relationship, and others go for religious reasons, but everybody meets at the same juncture, which is Santiago, Compostela de Santiago, which is the aim. I think there's an analogy to all of our lives there.
It's like the scallop shell, no? All those rays of the scallop shell, they start from the periphery, but they ultimately reach the node. And that's a nice symbol, I think, not just for Santiago or St. James, but for all of us. We all seek something, and there are different routes to get there.
So I suppose it doesn't really matter which route you take, and also the person who takes one route should not be annoyed or should not be critical about the other route, because all the routes end up in the same destination, I suppose.
As I always tell even the students, I say you must follow what works for you. And the other thing about the scallop shell, which I just realized, you find all those rays going towards the node, but those rays don't cross each other, no? They don't go and interfere with the other nodes going there. So part of the lesson there, I think, is you follow your path. You get advice from people who you think you need to follow, or you think have something to tell you. But don't go to tell the other fellow what I'm doing is correct, what you're doing is wrong. That is where the conflict and the trouble comes in. We each have our own Camino, we each have our own route. And as long as we don't hurt or harm other people while we follow our path, that's what is important.
But unfortunately, maybe due to the human influence, as Ajanta said, in Christianity, it says that do not worship other gods. In Buddhism, you talk about samma ditti, one ditti, which is correct. I don't know about Muslim, but so unfortunately, that element is there in many religions or philosophies. This is the right one, not the others.
And the thing is, you are born into that. It's not through your choice.
No,
that's why it is sad.
In fact, in the book, I said I'm a great respecter of all the great religious teachers, and I named them. But I said I cannot really condone the purveyors of organized religion who benefit from, shall we say, the gullibility perhaps of their followers. who benefit by saying, I'm right, you're wrong, so you follow me, not the other fellow. It's...
That is precisely why I'm a humanist.
Somebody asked me, what is your religion? I said, I'm an Abu Ben Adamist. He said, huh? When I was in school, we learned a poem called Abu Ben Adam by an American called Lee Hunt. Remember? Yeah. Abu Ben Adam made his tribe increase. And the story that an angel came down and Abu Ben Adam was sleeping. And Abu said, what are you doing? The angel said, I'm writing the names of those who love God. So Abu Ben said, is my name there? So the angel looked and said, no, your name is not here. No, I'm not saying it in the same picturesque, beautiful language that Lee Hunt used. Then Abu thought for a bit and said, if you can't write that I'm a person who loves God, just write that I'm a person who loves his fellow men. And by men, he said men and women. So Abu went back to sleep. About a week later, again, Abu got up and to see the angel writing in this book of gold. And they say, Abu looked and the book was, the angel are writing, not those who love God, but those whom God loves. And the name of Abu Ben Adam was the head of everybody. So I think philosophy is not to say we love this religion or contribute finances to that religion or that religious establishment, but that we love our fellow men and women and treat them with respect and compassion and kindness. So that is my philosophy. I'm an Abu Ben Adamist. I think
I just found it and I can read it. It's quite short.
Read.
Abu Ben Adam, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace, and saw within the moonlight in his room, making it rich, and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Adam bold, and to the presence in the room he said, what writest thou? The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord answered, the names of those who love the Lord. And is mine one? Said Abu. Nay, not so, replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, I pray thee then, write me as one that loves his fellow men. The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great waking light, and showed the names whom love of God had blessed. And lo, Ben Adam's name led all the rest. That's cool. There you go.
And also, Shivantha, you said at one stage when you were talking that you don't have any, you're not bound by any particular religion. Years ago, 2,500 years ago, I think there was a particular name given to such people. Paribrajika is the word they used in Buddhist literature. And the current name, I think, is agnostics. Am I correct?
Yeah, look, I think there are certain, I think every religion is a gateway and a platform from which you can launch your sense of understanding of life, right? And I'm very grateful that I was baptized. I was an altar boy. I sang in the choir. I was confirmed, and it gave me a springboard from which to kind of launch my own sense of understanding and that sense of like spirituality or agnosticism, whatever one wants to call it. I think it's important to have a gateway, to be brought up with something, to be given an introduction, because at the end of the day, there are universal truths. Like we can all sit and decipher what, whether one is right or one is wrong. But at the end of the day, we all know, if you really had to sit down, what is right and what is wrong. So the bottom line is that, yes, I think that having a religion at the start of life is quite important, or some form of teaching that gets you to look at yourself and to learn empathy. I think empathy is one of those things that really is important, and it doesn't matter what religion you start with. But I suppose agnostic is a word that one can use, yeah.
As you said, religion has obviously given us a very good kickstart. But the problem is people have, instead of learning the proper lesson or the ethics of how we should behave, they stuck up with their own religious beliefs into, my way and no other way. And that's why probably I believe that religion has now done its job, and probably we don't need to have religion or clinging to religions that much now. That's my personal view. Sorry.
Well, I'll only say one thing about it, and I promise I won't start a debate. The only observation I like to make is that even people who believe in a religion, if they rely on the holy text as evidence of what they should believe, they reject some of the things in the holy text as unacceptable as a human being. That shows there's something higher than that overriding their beliefs, because they themselves say, I know it says so in whatever text, but that's not right. And somebody else will say, no, but it's there in the text. You have to accept it. But you can't go on your own thoughts and interpretations. It's in the text. But they still say, no, I don't accept it. So that shows that people have an innate morality. That's it. No more for me.
Lal.
Yeah. This from Shivantha wants to know whether anybody has done a song on this pilgrimage. Whether Shihan or Sanjiva had done a song.
No, I mean there was an evening when we all actually no, there was two things. So there was an evening when we all at one of the Albert caves, and there was a guitar lying around, and the sense of camaraderie and the sense of music, because music transcends everything, right? Music, and I think Tate at one point sang a pilgrim song. He changed the words, and he had a song one night that he sang. But to answer that question, which I answered earlier, I haven't written anything musically directly correlating to the Camino.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was very nice to listen to you. Thank you.
I can tell you the song I sang, because Shivantha and there's another young man there who they were playing the guitar, and they're having a jam session, and they wanted everybody to sing. So I thought, okay, if I have to sing, I'll sing a song. And I said, how many miles must a pilgrim walk on before he can call it a day? And how many meals must a pilgrim consume before he detests pilgrim meals? And how many drinks must a pilgrim knock down before he can sing you a song? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. So, Andrew, that might answer your question about the how many drinks you must have.
Very good.
Thank you, Sanjiva and Shivantha and Mahendra and Ruan for arranging this. I need to excuse myself now. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivantha, for coming. It was so nice to see you.
And nice to have seen you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Sanjay. Bye.
Okay, see you then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Bye. Nice seeing.
Magus, hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I hope your knees are holding out, unlike numbers.
Right, Mahendra. If you don't have any more questions, shall we call it a day then?
I think that's about right. And I once again have to thank Sanjiva and his son, Shivantha, for providing the entertainment, because it was entertaining and also educational and thought-provoking. So many emotions come to my mind. But most of all, hugely enjoyable. So I will ask Ruan to unmute everybody as I say thank you very much and give them a hand clap. Okay, thank you very much.
I think everybody has to unmute.
Unmute.
Thank you.
You can unmute everybody.